All right. So this is the chat about David's trip to India, and an official welcome to everybody. My name is Will Forrester, and David Albert is one of actually several Friendly Water for the World folks who are on the chat today. I'm going to be your guide, and David will be your keynote speaker for today. And with that, I'm going to mention, as I always do at the start, our mission and vision. Our mission is to expand global access to low-cost clean water technologies and information about health and sanitation through knowledge sharing, training, applied research, community building, peacemaking, and efforts at sustainability. We do a lot. Our vision, and I always put this in the wrong place, our vision is of healthy, self-sustaining, empowered, peaceful communities, both here and abroad, sharing our knowledge with each other with life and hope restored through clean water. It always starts with clean water. So on that, I'm going to hand it over to David, who's going to introduce somebody else.
Well, I want to introduce you to my new friend, Uma Raghavan. You can call her Uma. She also goes by Rags.
Hello.
Uma has an extraordinary resume. She's originally from Bangalore, India. She works much in the tech world. The second one about Amazon is really shorthand because in fact she's worked with eBay and Microsoft and a bunch of other folks too. I think she's currently, with the exception of Integris Software, she's sort of on hiatus while she works on other things, but both Overlake Hospital in Bellevue and then advocating for education, women's health, environment, and homelessness, both in Western Washington and India. And I invited her to say a few words before we got started. So Uma, it's up to you.
Oh, thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I think my screen's freezing, but I'm going to try. Okay. So it's an honor and pleasure to be here. As David mentioned, I'm Uma, and yes, I've been in the tech industry and I founded an enterprise software company. But outside of my seemingly corporate experiences, I can tell you I've been an activist on the inside, even inside corporate America, championing ethical computing, data privacy, and fighting many a good battle for solving hard problems using technology. And I championed data privacy for US consumers that I started my own company and was invited up the US Capitol about 2 years ago, where I kept urging the US government to get stricter with data privacy and more. But outside of that, I want to talk a little bit about how I came about in meeting David. A little bit about me outside of what David said was I grew up in Bangalore, India, and came to the US as a student to pursue master's in computer science back in 1992. So for me, coming to the inner city at Detroit was a reverse culture shock of sorts in 1992. And at my campus, none of us drank tap water, because it was rumored back then that lead poisoning was very rampant, and we were all told never to drink the tap water. And now you all know about the horror stories at Flint, but I'm talking 1992. So the Detroit locals knew back then the issues with the water. And as a poor graduate student who didn't know much about America, fresh off the boat, I realized that 24 cans of Coca-Cola was cheaper than one bottle of water. So I started drinking Coca-Cola. And I cluelessly guzzled, sugar-filled water for almost a year, as did my peers. This was the pre-commercial internet eras where you couldn't do homework, you didn't understand much, until a professor chided us and said we were harming our bodies. So the other thing I wanted to also point out is one of the richest states in America, California, a couple years ago went through a drought and severe water shortage that the residents were all asked to conserve water and not water their lawns. It turned out that the big agro industries like the almond and the walnut growers were using excessive water and for their farms, in addition to Nestle, taking water from the state and selling it as bottled water for profits. I only illustrate this to, I know I'm preaching to the choir and I'm the new kid in the block, but I just wanted to, tell you about my journey with how I kept learning how water, even in the first world, this richest nation, access to water can be an issue, and mostly because of man-made greed and destruction of water tables and siphoning of groundwater to greedy corporations who then sell it for huge profits. So I frequently travel, and I've struggled to find drinking water even at Madrid or Toledo, Spain, during a 40-degree heat wave, if you didn't carry your own water bottle. Like, no one will give you a sip of water. I actually find, when I travel to in other countries in Asia, poorer countries, where people will at least give you a sip of water. But in Spain, in Europe, it's really, really hard until you find a store that stocks water. And many cities like Cape Town have hit day zero, where there's absolutely no water. So the West is largely full of food deserts. For miles, one cannot find, food, decent food or water. It's the same in Cambodia or Vietnam, where I've traveled. And when I backpacked, in the non-tourist parts, access to drinking water was really, really a huge problem. And I do frequently visit to India, which is my home still. And both the rural and urban landscapes have dramatically changed even since I left in 1992. And it worries me that water is the biggest hidden crisis that not many are talking about. The fact that Chennai had immense floods due to heavy rainfall and then suffers severe water shortages is telling of the greedy urban growth that has destroyed water bodies and the water catchment techniques. And a lack of rainwater and groundwater has left multiple reservoirs in Chennai completely dry. So Kerala too, which I was very heavily involved during the floods with their relief work, they had the most devastating flood in recent memory. And while they have a lot of water bodies, I visited them recently, I found, again, access to drinking water, even in the backwaters, was a big challenge without having to pay for those wild plastic water bottles. So Coca-Cola, which operates multiple I think 58 to 60 bottling plants in India, depleted the groundwater, leading to a lot of protests. And they had done it both in Uttar Pradesh, Kerala, and so it's a complex mess of multinational companies, mismanagement. And I also want to talk a little bit about my own hometown, Bangalore, which in most recent history of any city has seen huge population growth, and it went from the city being a city of lakes to the city of concrete, and it's got filthy, foaming, frothing lakes that burst into flames. I'm sure you've all seen those horrific images. With extreme rapid urbanization and an explosive population, poor water management has led to dry taps and falling groundwater levels. But this was not the case hundreds of years ago. When the city of Bangalore was founded in 1537 by Kempegowda, he constructed dedicated water tanks, reservoirs to supply water for not only for domestic use, but for irrigational purposes. And he connected them well in addition to rainwater catchments and protecting the existing lakes. So the city was built and organized around water bodies. So the water, our exterior city planners were way more good at all these things. And it's the same even in the Himalayas, where you think they have huge glacier melts. With global warming, I was in Ladakh, where I volunteer with schools in 2011, where I saw snow-capped ranges, and then I went back in 2018. They've had cloudbursts and flash flooding and severe drought and water shortage. And I've been talking to David in what we can do at Ladakh, because there's just no groundwater tables, but there's severe water shortage. So it's not that we humans haven't thought of good water management, especially at India. There's rich history of step wells, water pumping techniques. So something very simple and local. And that's what attracted me to working with David. I'm an ally, and I work with Coalition of Seattle Indians. That's the org that brought me and David together. We were supporting the Shaheen Bagh protests at Delhi in solidarity, and David happened to be close by at a labor encampment at Shaheen Bagh. And when he mentioned about the deep water crisis affecting multiple urban pockets of India, where the hardworking class don't have utilities, I jumped on board and got interested to learn more about the friendly water especially the low cost technologies that, he's using. So with that, you all know David, and I guess he's a board chairman. He's a published author of homeschooling, and I guess an authority in that field. He's also a musician who can sing opera. Did you all know that? He can sing opera. And
And
and he plays the violin. So without further ado, I want to pass it on to David. Thank you.
thank you so much, Uma. And I want to turn it over now, before I get started, to Ronelle Funk. I see you there. Ronelle, every year we hold a conference in South India. It's called the Savodya, the Welfare of All Conference, that we hold at my second home in India at Gandhigram, far South India, which brings activists and students, mostly from within Tamil Nadu, but actually from all over the country. And we have a training center there. And Ronelle came over to be part of that with her 2 children, and to dedicate a refurbished, really new training center for us at Gandhigram. And she's just going to tell you briefly about her experience. So Ronelle, turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. So nice to see people's faces that I've heard names of already. This first picture is of me and Claire, and Claire's actually Wayne's beloved, and she in the last minute went to India with me. She absolutely loves Anna, elephants, and so we got to ride an elephant. We were very happy about that. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about how I got involved also with Friendly Water. Also, I went to Friendly Water years ago now, maybe 6 years ago, had a kind of a local fundraiser that I went to and got interested in and started giving them some money. And then my father actually got sick and was going to pass away, and he started to give money, started giving money to different people. And I was like, you should really find out about Friendly Water. So I took him to another fundraiser, and he got to meet David and Wayne and a couple other people. And together, he and I actually gave some money to rebuild the training center at Gandhigram. So that's actually how we got involved. And then I went to the training to learn how to do biosand filters last August in Anacortes, and took one of my kids with me. You'll see a picture in a minute of that. Maybe we can, there they are. So I have 2 kids. I have Casey on the left and Sasha on the right. And Sasha went with me to learn the biosand filter training, and they both came with me to Gandhigram for the building dedication. And it was really a great experience for all of us. We first went to Madurai, and we went to the Gandhi Museum. And, they knew a little bit about Gandhi, but from school, but it was really nice for them to go to the museum and learn quite a bit about the story, which just dovetailed into meeting Krishnamal and learning about Jagannathan and Vinoba, and it was just really, really wonderful. So we actually stayed in Gandhigram in the new training center, and we ate our meals right there in the lovely courtyard and group room. And it was a great experience for them to just not only have the culture of India, but also understand what Krishnamal has been done, what she's been doing, her family's been doing. Also learning about the effect she had on the shrimp industry and what's going on with that. I also think one of the big impacts it had on the kids was, and me, was how much plastic and how much garbage, doesn't get, well, I don't think recycling even is the answer either. I think we should just stop using plastics altogether. But the Gandhigram campus is no plastics, which we loved. And as you know, we were in India, we saw that plastics just aren't being recycled, and they just lead to garbage and trash. And that's why I even more am excited about the biosand filter, so people aren't using plastic bottles and buying plastic bottles, and they can just be putting the water directly into the biosand filters. So I think it had impact on my kids, and I'm hoping that they can go out too and spread the word for Friendly Water. And I've also worked with Liga. I don't know if any of you have heard of Liga or Doctors Without Borders. I've also worked with their water sanitation team, and we've gone to El Fuerte, Mexico, which was a team that came to learn from Friendly Water how to build the biosand filters. And we actually went to El Fuerte and built and taught 30 people how to make biosand filters. And then they went out into the community also. So I'm excited to further help Friendly Water with the projects in India. I'm in love with India, and I hope that I can get back soon. Is there any questions, or David, is there anything else that you wanted me to talk about? Oh, there's a training.
No, we can just show the pictures.
Wayne Wayne helped a lot in the pre-planning, right?
Right.
And we
that
stayed
was with Jamal.
Yep. And and that's in memory of my dad and my stepmom who passed away, and that's their quote that they have on their memorial. And so the building was dedicated to them, which made me cry. I don't know what other pictures we have in there. Oh, there I am talking to Gandhi. We're having a nice conversation.
That's the last one.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or want me to add anything else, David.
No, I think that kind of gives a great introduction to what I'm going to talk about. So again, as usual, every year I'm in India at least once, always in February, because our conference is always being held at Gandhigram around February 10th to February 13th. My birthday is February 13th, and I always celebrate my birthday at Gandhigram. It's become quite a tradition. This year they gave me a giant idli. An idli is a breakfast food. It's a rice and lentil cake, and it's usually about the size of $50, maybe slightly larger than that. But they made one that was about 19 inches across, which is great.
It was delicious. It was delicious.
And I'm not a great fan of sweets, so it was just perfect for me. Friendly Water works with the most marginalized and disadvantaged people you can find worldwide. We work with refugees, we work with people with HIV, we work with marginalized people such as Dalits, quote, untouchables. We work with forest people, indigenous people. And I have to tell you, this work makes the work infinitely more difficult, but it also makes the work that much more rewarding. Next slide. We have three objectives in what we do. We want to make it possible for communities to ensure their own safe drinking water supply. We don't see ourselves as a charity, or if we are, we're the anti-charity charity. We figure if we can provide schools and skills and tools and impetus and motivation, we don't have to do things for communities when in fact they can learn to do things for themselves. We try to build community self-sufficiency through all the technologies that are part of our platform. Again, a lot of these communities have been heavily damaged by what has happened in the last 100 years. The communities are withering away, their environments are withering away, and we want to build that up, and I'll have more on that as we go through the slideshow. And finally, we promote effective altruism. And effective altruism simply means we want to show folks that people can do amazing things with really small amounts of money. You don't have to be a big, giant international organization. We can do things with small amounts of money if we target them well, if we have good partners on the ground, provide the right technology, provide excellent training. Hello, Stephen Marwa. Next slide, please. So, I have to tell you, I've been going back and forth to India for 43 years. And while I have traveled worldwide, India is the place I always go back to. And because I always tell people it's because it's got the best of everything and the worst of everything all in one place. And trying to explain India to people, unless you've got a couple hours, is sometimes hard. I'm going to do the best I can here. But I just wanted to note a couple of things. It's a country of immense wealth. There are 400,000 plus millionaires. There are billionaires. The country is immensely wealthy. It has the largest middle class in the world, 600 million people, all driving cars these days or motorbikes and whatever, trying to live in apartments that look relatively close to what apartments in the US would look like. They're self-sufficient in food production, believe it or not. It's not distributed well, we'll talk about that, but they are self-sufficient, and they are a major exporter of foods, grains, fish, and especially beef. I know you find that odd of a country that has people who would seem to worship cows, but in fact, they're tied with Brazil as the world's leading beef exporter. They have huge natural resources reserve. They also have the second highest rate of solar energy capacity growth. It's the second largest population of Muslims in the world. You don't usually think of India as a Muslim country. They're only 15% of the population, give or take a couple percent, depends on who's counting that year. But it has a huge Muslim population. It has a huge pharmaceutical industry. You know, we've heard our president in the business about hydroxychloroquine. Well, it turns out 47% of the world's supply of hydroxychloroquine is produced by 8 companies in India. And finally, it has a socialist constitution written by Ambedkar, Baba Ambedkar, a Dalit leader, constitutional scholar, a law degree from Columbia University, a very strong Bill of Rights. So you have all those things you need to know about India, and then you go to the next part. Next slide. 300+ million people live in poverty. India ranks behind Sudan and North Korea in the World Hunger Index, which immediately tells you there's plenty of food, but it's not distributed well. More than 1/3 of the world's malnourished children live in India. 70% of India's children suffer from anemia. Stunting of children is above 20% of the population. Going to go back to that later. In some places like Uttar Pradesh, where Benjamin is from, it is above 50%. Air pollution in the major cities is the worst in the world. In New Delhi in November, well, I don't go to New Delhi in November. I mean, I probably would not survive. There are 175 million Dalits, quote, untouchables, and more than 120 million tribal people facing massive social discrimination. And finally, democracy is extremely fragmented. And if I had an hour, Uma and I could talk rather length about what that actually looks like on the ground. Next slide. So there is our friend, happy birthday to Mary Seed Lidwin, our South India coordinator. For years, I've been trying to get people to paint biosand filters and failed. I even tried to do a contest with a cash prize. I couldn't get people to paint their filters. And I said, this should be the most beautiful thing in your home. Well, Lidwin took that to heart. I don't know if this was your first or second attempt, but now there are people all over the world painting their filters. So thank you, Lidwin. Next. I've been going to India for 43 years, and this is what I can tell you. The water in India is much worse than 40 years ago. The water utilities in every major Indian city are overwhelmed. Just as Chennai ran out of water, literally ran out of water in a city of, well, who knows how many people, we'll say 8 million, ran out of water in 2019. This is expected to happen in 21 cities. We always talk about people going from the countryside to the cities. In what happened in Chennai, people started moving from the cities to the countryside. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. All the rivers are polluted. In the state of Gujarat, there's not a single river in the entire state that you can drink from. As water dries up, as India becomes more of a desert, and we'll talk about that later, deeper wells are bringing up extremely dangerous levels of fluoride. And you see the results, people generally having very brown teeth, but you're also seeing people with a lot of bone injuries and bone deformations. In certain parts of the country, Bengal and Bihar, arsenic has rushed down from the Himalayas, and it's in the groundwater. And when you pump up large amounts of water, you're spraying arsenic onto your food and water supply. And there are major places in Bihar and West Bengal in particular where arsenic's a terrific problem. I know Sharmila Pal is on this call, Again, she could talk to you about that for a couple of hours. And then finally, we're seeing waterborne illnesses that haven't been seen in decades returning with a vengeance. Government doesn't like to talk about it, but there's cholera all over the place. And when I say doesn't like to talk about it, I know Benjamin has been working with poor communities, and he reports that there is cholera in many of the villages in Uttar Pradesh. But if you ask the Uttar Pradesh government, they'll tell you there aren't any. And they send their reports to the national government, and they say therefore there aren't any. They send them to the World Health Organization and say there isn't any. But Benjamin has seen them firsthand. And we're seeing this all over India. Next. So this is my favorite slide. This slide, I call this slide development. The reason I call it development, this is the Yamuna River. It supplies most of the water supply, drinking water supply for New Delhi. There are people who've been doing rituals in this river for as long as time can be remembered. And there they are doing their rituals in this river. Upstream from this picture are three large, lots of little factories, but three large ones built with funds from the World Bank, the IMF, and the Ford Foundation. And this is what comes down river. There's a bridge that you see up above. I asked Will to put the bridge back in. The bridge is an important part of this picture because Delhi, of course, doesn't grow any food. And so all the food has to be exported from often far away, and they bring the food into Delhi over that bridge. I have to tell you, the Yamuna River right now, because those factories are closed, is clear. I couldn't find a good picture to post, but for the moment, it's clear, thanks to COVID-19. But who knows what's going to happen afterwards. Next slide. Now, India has an excellent public health system. The infant mortality is relatively low, but the diseases among children as a result of waterborne illnesses are relatively high. There is child malnutrition. 48% of Indian children are said to be malnourished. 1/3 of those children come from higher income families. The reason the problem exists is because the water is so poor that there may be food available, but the children aren't able to digest their food. So we think of malnutrition as a food problem, but actually at its core, it's a water problem. Children will miss on average two out of every 5 days of school, usually because of waterborne illnesses. And then finally, girls are leaving school early. There are no sanitation facilities in the schools for them. There's no hygiene facilities, and they leave school. Next slide. I talked about Indian children are malnourished. Even when there is enough food, children are unable to digest it because of chronic waterborne illnesses. There's a condition called parasitic stress. Child between the ages of 1 and 5, but as Peter noted, usually between the ages of 6 months and 30 months, children need food to nourish their brain capacities and as well as their body. And when the body is fighting off these waterborne parasites, there's no energy to build the brain. And the result of it is by the time of age 5, when they might be going to school, the children have permanent cognitive deficits. You could teach them all you want in school, they're not going to learn very much. I actually see that firsthand when I'm in India. I remember with fondness the conversations I used to have with auto rickshaw drivers in the 70s. And no longer, now you mostly get blank stares in auto rickshaws, has been my experience. And that's a result of kids with parasitic stress growing up to being adults. There's also an increased risk for adult illnesses associated with waterborne illnesses, diabetes, heart attacks, and strokes. Finally, going along with parasitic stress, there's the problem of stunting. Again, Peter talked about that much last week. It was an excellent talk. And again, the children are stunted by age of 5. There's no cure for it. It can't be reversed. And according to people in the Indian government, This represents the largest loss of human potential of any country in the history of the world. So I've painted the picture of India. Now I go to India. Next slide, please. This is the beginnings of our answer. This picture is taken in Bihar, one of our programs, founded in 2014 in Muzaffarpur. That's not orange juice, folks. That's what the water looks like normally. The normal drinking water looks like. And on the right is what it looks like after it goes through a biosand water filter. Next slide. We begin in India. Folks, many folks on this list know that I'm a Gandhian of sorts. And I've often looked to Gandhi for answers to contemporary problems. But in India, of course, Gandhi's central organizing concept is in tune with Indian history and culture. The move is toward political and economic decentralization and democracy rooted in the village. If you have what you need in the village, and it's a place of conviviality, and you have the tools you need, you don't need to move to the cities. You have what you need there. We're hoping to see life, hope, better health, and empowerment restored through clean water. And to quote Gandhi, what we hope to see is a complete republic, independent of its neighbors for its own vital wants and needs, and yet interdependent from many others in which dependence is necessary. So that's kind of our vision of what I see, at any rate, for friendly water in India. Moving along, next slide. There's a good part of my team. I went into India. This was at the Gandhigram Training Center. You may want to know what those purple umbrellas are. The board chair of Friendly Water gets to make awards. And we make special awards of purple. It's called the Purple Umbrella Award. And we award it to people who've gone well beyond what you could ever expect in working with the most marginalized and dispossessed populations. And I very happily got to award 3 purple umbrellas on my recent trip to India. You're going to meet most of these people as we go through this PowerPoint. 2 that I don't think I have slides on. The second one in from the left is Inamul Hassan, who is our India national coordinator. Renga Nayaki, who writes wonderful anti-capitalist and anti-government songs. She's our song leader from northern Tamil Nadu. And you'll note there is Lidwin. I think she probably weighs all of 90 pounds, but producing bricks are with our new brick-making machine at Gandhigram. Moving along. Next slide, please. So at Gandhigram, Wayne led a team to build a rainwater catchment system that holds, actually 2 of them, that hold 20,000 liters at Gandhigram. And there's my phone going crazy, and I'll shut it off. The catchment system is now connected to our new refurbished training center, and the water is used. It's especially used for cows and used for agriculture, but it is also used when we have a lot of people to feed at the training center. And in the south, we have programs in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, and are working toward ones in Kerala. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So this was a women's only training that was done at Gandhigram. Here they are sifting sand and gravel. At Gandhigram, with beehive of activity, and of course everybody from the adjoining university campus wanted to know what was going on, so we got to do many presentations there. The women came from all over Tamil Nadu, but they actually came from as far away as Nepal. You may see the woman in the slacks and the black shirt high up in the picture. She actually comes from Nepal. Next slide. Next one. There we are. Lidwin is a great trainer and teacher. Sometimes I think we should bottle her, but she's too small. We wouldn't have a large enough quantity. But Lidwin is fantastic at teaching and training, and she's worked all over India. I think her next venture is going to be working with widows, a widows program in Calicut, Kerala. Next. Next slide. Lidwin and Ranganayake are also learning all there is to know about brick making. We're making our own machines rather than buying them commercially. Our welding master, Srinivasan, who lives not 50 yards from my place in Gandhigram, he's a professor of industrial technology. He builds all our molds for us for all over India, and he's built our first brick making machine. Next slide. That's what the bricks look like. They're interlocking bricks. They require almost no water, almost no cement. They interlock when you build the buildings. They require virtually no mortar, and they're extremely strong. Next slide. As I said, Lidwin likes to paint filters. I don't think we have permission from Disney to use this slide, but I'm using it anyway. Move on, next slide. Also in Tamil Nadu, so we have other representatives in Tamil Nadu. This is a gentleman named Mayaraj in southeastern Tamil Nadu. And he had the idea of providing filters to tribal people, Adivasi people in the Palani Hills, where there are no roads, no way to get there. And they were suffering from waterborne illnesses, especially giardia, which you find in hilly areas all over the world. And so his team, he has a 15-person team. They literally carried 160-pound biosand filters up mountains. It's nothing I would have told them to do. They just thought this is something they should do. And so here they are crossing a river with a biosand filter, bought it, brought it up, and installed it in the mountain villages. You notice the dog in the picture. Yes, Sharmila, I noticed the Indian dog in the picture too. Next slide. We're moving to a different part of India. This is Ajmat Ullah Khan working in Umaria in Madhya Pradesh, a very rural tribal area of central India. As I say, it's about 3 days away from everywhere. Actually, it's not, but I exaggerate. But he's asked me to come several times, and I have to figure out where I can get the time to do so. Ajmat, I always tell Kurt that Ajmat is code word for 20 people. He's got a team working in this community around all kinds of different issues. He's also leader of a national youth leadership song, which has thousands of members. But the work he likes best is working in his local areas of Umaria. Next slide. So here he was training women to build biosand water filters in a village not too far from Umaria. Umaria is both the name of a district and also the name of a town, and there are many little towns and villages around there. So here they were building filters. Next slide. Installing filters. Very high rates of waterborne illness in this area. And this has made a huge difference with people. Next one. But Umaria, like much of India, is becoming a desert these days. It's not necessarily that rainfall is less, although in my place in Gandhigram, rainfall has gone from 38 inches a year to 24 inches a year. But rather that it comes in shorter bursts so that you get flooding and then you get drought. And Umaria is one of those areas worst hit. It's made worse by the fact that the soil is somewhat rocky, doesn't hold water well. So most of it sits on the surface where malaria mosquitoes breed. And then there are these water holes, and people walk as many kilometers as they need to take water out of these holes. Next slide, please. So we asked the question, if India is becoming a desert, what would you do about it? Simple, to go learn from the desert people. we have a project that began in 2011 with Gravis, a wonderful Gandhian organization in Rajasthan that works in the Thar Desert, where they get anywhere from 8 to 12 inches of rain a year. And they have to collect enough water in this period to last them all year round. And they have many technologies, but one is called the tanka. And the tanka is a catchment which is half above ground, half below ground. And basically you contour your land in such a way so that the water will stream into the tanka. Now, that water quickly becomes bacterial soup. But if you have a biosand water filter, when you're taking out the water for use, you just put it through a biosand filter and you've got clean water. We had a tremendously effective program there, and the people in Rajasthan are so thankful that we sent 4 folks to begin to learn the desert technologies. And we hope to bring those technologies along with our other ones to Umaria and to Nalanda, where you'll hear about that in a minute. But the idea being that, you know, many of the houses are mostly grass huts. You can't really collect the water for our form of rainwater catchments. It can be used for peaters, for underground growing, but the idea is that we could begin to build tanka technologies elsewhere in India to deal with the desert. Next slide, please. When I was in the desert, I asked to see some of the Bishnoi people. Bishnoi people are the people that invented hugging trees. And in 1732, the Maharaja Ajit Singh II wanted to build a new palace, and he came to chop their trees. They hugged the trees, men and women alike, and 363 people were hacked to death. But the Maharaja was so appalled that he declared it, the area of the Bishnoi people, a forest preserve in perpetuity. It's the first you could think of it as the first national park in the world. And deer come up to your house and feed from your hand. There are animals everywhere. This is right in the middle of the desert. And Jordaram and I, besides wearing similar turbans, we share a birthday. So we joked that we were twins that were separated at birth and just ended up in different locations. Next slide, please. This is a major project that we hope to work on soon. I'm hoping at the end of this year, depending on what happens to the virus and stuff. Our friends at Nalanda Academy have started a one-year school training program for 275 gifted Dalit and minority youth. They're very gifted, but their educations, even though they were always top of their classes, have been poor. They've been located in poor places where they've been discriminated against. And the idea is that if with the proper 1 year, you could think of it as a finishing school if you like, but in this 1 year, they can be trained, their English can be improved, their math skills can be improved, their interview skills, their writing of applications, how to deal with bullying once they get to schools. And the program has been hugely successful. I mean, it's a spectacular program. I urge you to look up Nalanda Academy online. You can learn all about them. I know David Willis has visited. It's located in Water, the center of the country, but their problem is their wells have failed. There's no reliable source of water. And last year they had to send the students home early because they had no water. And the available water makes villagers sick. And since the students stay with the families, they may get sick too. So if we can attract the funding, hello people, if we can attract the funding, we want to teach them to build water catchments, both the attached ones and tankas, biosand water filters, and we want to install microflush toilets. And this will be a two-part venture. The idea is that we will train, not only will we provide these initiatives for the academy, but we will train our people from all over India in water, right in the center of the country. So it's a multi-part project. I'm very, very excited about it, and I'm just hoping we can pull it off. The project will be headed by a team that includes Inamul Hassan and Ajmat Khan from Umaria. Next slide, please. Now we're moving to the Lucknow area, where Benjamin Christie has been working for some 20 years, totally as a volunteer, training folks from all over the area. And he recently did some work in Barabanki prison, a prison for 2,500 inmates who are all getting sick from bad water. Next slide. So first he did a training with a partnership from a group from Inamclaw. And again, Benjamin works with the most marginalized people you can possibly imagine. For those who are not from India, he works, among other people, he works with people called the Musahar, who are known as the rat eaters, to kind of give you a feel for what that must be like. Next slide. Here's Benjamin in the prison. He was installing some filters in the juvenile section of the prison. I believe there were 85 juveniles. And then the women's section of the prison. The women are often sentenced and they live there with their children, and they had 2 deaths from waterborne illnesses in the previous 6 months among the children in the prison. And so he came and he taught health and sanitation techniques, as well as installing filters. He paints brilliant filters too. Next slide, please. There's a woman and child from Barabanki prison. Next slide. So that's all that we put up for Benjamin. But Benjamin, thank you so much for your work and your dedication. You do incredible things with people. Moving over south of Delhi, there is a group of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar who escaped. And then 7 or 8 years ago, they saw there was really no place for them in Bangladesh. There was no place for them on the Indian border with Bangladesh. And they found a community willing to take them in Mewat, about 70 kilometers south of New Delhi. The Mayo people from there were the original people who rebelled against the British in the Sepoy Mutiny. Very rural, we might say backward community, but it's an insular community. They grow food very well, and they said to this community, come, we don't have anything, you don't have anything, we can have nothing together. Next slide. This is what one of the refugee camps looks like. There's about 4,400 refugees here. This is what the camps look like. I have many stories at the camp. I've been there twice now. This is Camp 3. Every child, there are 42 families in Camp 3. Every child is sick. They were averaging a death every 2 to 3 months before we got biosand filters into the camp. Now they don't have them. This camp is one of the oldest camps. Some of the camps have been burnt down, usually by landlords who want to get even more rent, and they build them again, and they build them better. This one hasn't been built down, hence the horrible looking conditions. Actually, this means that the camp has been around for a long time. People have said that is the saddest anyone has ever seen me look in a picture. I think that is probably true. Next slide. That was my team that worked with the Rohingya refugees. Next slide. These are some of the refugees themselves. As I tell people about my trip, my first trip, I became a rock star there. When I first came to see them, first I had people down for an hour and said, just tell me your stories. No one had listened to them 7 or 8 years from the outside world. I mean, there are no NGOs, nobody else there. We were the first ones to show up. And after the couple of hours I spent with them telling me their horrific family stories and how they escaped, often with many family members killed. They told me I was supposed to stay in a hotel that night, 40 kilometers away. And I said, like hell, I came 9,000 miles to be with you. I'm not going to a hotel. And they asked, where will you sleep? And I said, that's my problem. And I ended up sleeping on a table. Table was fine. I can sleep anywhere. It's something I've trained myself in. And I slept very well, as it turns out. And when I woke up in the morning, I was a rock star. Next slide. You can read this slide for yourself. Next slide. This is my friend Abdul Karim, except now I have two friends called Abdul Karim there. But he was 24 years old. He's 24 years old. Most of his family was killed as they were escaping from Myanmar. Only he and his sister survived, and they came to this camp. And he is now in this camp. He is married, I believe, and lives in one of the camps. Next slide, please. Next slide. This was the first filter we installed in the camp. This is another Abdul Karim. I'll talk about him in a minute. Next slide. So Abdul Karim spreads the truth about biosand filters, and here he is speaking. David Willis is in that picture too. We were in the camp, and he's telling them all about how biosand filters have saved the lives of his children and his family. Next one. We took down some data from the camp, and we're actually getting a lot more data now. But prior to having a biosand filter, he said his children were constantly sick. He was spending $21 a month on hospitals, clinics, and medications. These are refugees who don't have any money. Now, very rare expenditures on health. If he'd spent $50, in fact, he built his own filter, but you would save $250 in the first year, $1,250 over 5 years. There'd be funds for school fees, better food, and family needs. And Abdul Karim, who you met, has become the builder and promoter. Second slide. Family number two. This was actually the head man of camp number one. He had 8 children. Prior to the filter, they were spending $84 a month, this is US dollars, on hospitals, clinics, and medications. Now they only spend $14 a month, saving of $840 in the first year, $4,200 over 5 years. This would be for one family. Next one. We have projects all over India. The oldest one goes back to 2011 in Rajasthan. Some are more active than others. They're not all success stories. I could tell you all about each of them in detail. But we have been spreading in India. Next slide, please. Our future projects, funding permitted and COVID gone. With Ajmat, we want to do a model village. We want to introduce all of our technologies. It's a very rural location with not a lot of ongoing contact from the outside world. It's a perfect case study where we could do what would happen if we tried to build a village republic in Umaria. Coupled with that, we want to do the demonstration project with Nalanda Way Academy. The people from Umaria, he would probably take a 5-person team, and we would have people from other parts of India and train them all at Nalanda Way, and then people would go out to their other states. We have a biosand filter project in the making with widows and orphans in Kerala. And then finally, we want to expand our work with backward communities in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, thank you, Benjamin, and in Amul, and in Karnataka, where some of the water conditions are horrific. Next slide. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much. Hello, Charles.
All right, well, thank you so much, David and Ronelle and Uma. I'm going to unmute everyone. If you'd rather not, feel free to stay muted yourself. If anybody has any questions for any of our speakers, feel free to speak up or raise your hand or however you'd like to interject. I know we've gone a little over on time. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. David, could you describe a little bit more the technical part of the Tonka catchment water tanks?
Yes. They can be built in two ways. They can be built with bricks and cement underground and above ground. It's a laborious process, but it can be done. They can also be built sectionally with molds, with curved molds that are then mortised together, both above ground and underground. I have been dreaming of a third solution, which is a combination of the two, whereby we would use the sectional approach or the bricks, the rocks and mortar, but then
There's
on
the guy
top,
just emailed you.
but then on top, we would use something like what we use for our other form of rainwater catchment system, where we would use a ferro cement thing, which would be lighter and easier to build. So there might be some hybrids that we may be able to try out.
How is the water directed? How is the water directed into?
We contour the land.
Oh, I'm not.
We literally contour the land, and it flows through.
You make it essentially like a dirt funnel or something,
Correct.
more or less.
Correct. I had Will took out the photo that I had that actually showed that more, but that's okay. Yeah, you funnel the water.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, I've seen, I want to specifically, maybe you share more on the looking blocks. Huh? I've seen the photos, the blocks seem to be so nice. Huh? Mm-hmm. But I wanted maybe you to confirm to us whether your pictures of any buildings that have been done from the looking blocks.
You've actually been at one. You've been at Richard's Training Center. Mm-hmm. Richard's beautiful building is made all with interlocking bricks.
Wonderful.
And I was actually at a 4-story building in Madurai with Lidwin. Mm-hmm. Lidwin, you were there too. That was made with, it was a beautiful, 4 stories tall, made all with interlocking bricks. Very beautiful. Yes, I can confirm that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Hello to everyone. I've seen more people come in. I saw Doug Smith, Jenny there. Sharmila, hello.
Hi. I had a quick question. Could you elaborate the Himachal project? It's the closest to Ladakh, so I thought.
Yes. So in 2014, we trained a group called Sachi in Himachal. And they built many filters, and in fact, in 2015, they got an award from the state government for a most innovative community service project in all of Himachal. Their work has expanded to include northern parts of Haryana as well. They have been using mostly biosand filters made of cement. Those on top of, where they go up hills, they've also been using a galvanized steel model. And I'm looking forward to get back in touch with Sachi. That's on my agenda for this month.
Right. I have a question.
Where in Himachal are they located?
Hmm?
Where in Himachal are they located?
I'm not going to throw out locations unless I can confirm them.
Yeah.
How much money are you trying to raise for the work, to expand the work this coming year? And are any funds coming from within India, from some of the businesses or wealthier people there? And also, how about the Indian community in the United States?
There's a multiple set of questions there, a wonderful set of questions. So first of all, you should know that given what's been going on now, Friendly Water cut its projected budget for this year from $889,000 to $480,000.
Wow.
We're just expecting that kind of downturn. And we can survive and do projects on that amount of money. It just won't be as robust as obviously if we had more money available. Yes, in India, I have contacts with and are going to be working with communities that do have sources of funds who are very interested, energized, and excited about our work. I can't go into more details right now, but yeah, that we are expecting significant amounts of the money to come from India. We haven't yet budgeted all the projects I put up on the wall. Dwight and I have been estimating that a combination of the Nalanda Way Academy project and the Umaria project will cost in total between $50,000 and $60,000, but that might be spread over 2 years. The projects that Benjamin does, generally speaking, cost less. If we do the project in Kerala with Lidwin, that one will be paid for by the local community. We won't have to lay out a dime. That will be coming from Indian donors. And I'm busy trying to raise our budget. As you can imagine, it's not an easy time. It's not an easy time for any NGOs in the United States, even raising for within the United States, no less elsewhere. We're hopeful that things will get better.
Thank you.
Oh, Indian community here, yes. Well, we do have support within the Indian community here. Of course, we're lucky to be not too far from the larger, for lack of a better term, the larger Microsoft community here. We have friends within it. We hope to be raising more funds from within this community in the future. We have already raised some, but you know, I would love to have them raise the funds for the Nalanda Way project.
Great, thank you.
Any other takers? Any hands going up? I'm gonna make sure I catch
And you can
any.
always write me, folks, or call me on the phone. I'm not going out. My phone number is 360-918-3642. I'm on WhatsApp. I'm always home. I haven't gone out yet a little bit in 3.5 weeks. My wife, who is a hospice nurse, determined that because she's old, I'm ancient, she's old, and has some other conditions, she's not to see patients anymore, so all of her visits are virtual, still working, but all her visits are virtual. It's going to drive her absolutely insane, but that's the way things are. So we're here, I'm here all the time, and I love to talk to people.
And I want to say hi to Claire because she's with Wayne, Claire of the Anna fame.
Hello, Ronelle. Hello, Abraham.
How are you?
Thank you all so much for spending time. Will, do you know what's on tap for next week yet?
Yes, actually Wayne is going to be telling us all about biosand water filters, how they work, how to build one, how their effects and how they're utilized. So if you've never had an opportunity to come to our training, or you've come to our training and want a refresher, or you're curious about really the bread and butter of friendly water for the world and how making clean water throughout the world happens with these amazing devices, please tune in next week.
Same time on Friday at noon?
That's right, same time, same place.
With apologies to all the folks from India and Australia, New Zealand, we know the time is what it is.
All right, on that note, I think we'll say goodbye for today, and I hope everyone can join us next week at Friday at noon. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to David, reach out to me. We'll be in touch.